Before we go any farther, you need to let me know down below what is the single worst rule you have come across in any Commander pod. I'll wait, pause the video. I want to hear about some of the most ridiculous times where you've gone to an LGS or your friends invited you over to someone's new pod and you went to go play and they gave you the most ridiculous thing, the most ridiculous restriction you've ever heard of that maybe shut down like 90% of your decks because you thought it was a perfectly normal thing to be playing board wipes or counter spells, or maybe for you Maskets out there, mass land destruction. There are rules in Commander pods that are more reasonable than others, and that's kind of what I wanted to talk about today. How this level of like policing has gotten so ridiculous that it doesn't make any sense anymore. It's like really counterintuitive, and it really tells on people. Like it really just brings their insecurities up to the front. And how like if we just had conversations and were open to certain things, like Commander and the game that we know and love would actually just be a better experience overall. We could actually have the experience that we want without having to, I don't know, like make someone else's day even worse. Because I think that's what it should be about at the end of the day. The gathering is such a big part of the game that, especially after the lockdown and, you know, kind of everyone coming back to the LGS and the whole revival of the Pioneer format, constructed Magic big and wide, and Commander just always being there, I think being social and being communicative is just like at an all-time low, it feels like, in Magic. It's nice to see that we interact with each other on social platforms, that you all comment down below, the ones that interact with me that are on my Discord and everything. I shouldn't say my Discord, the Mill Discord in general. Y'all are cool, y'all are great people, and I hope you are continuing this type of behavior outside, going to, you know, continue to have these type of open communications, these open like dialogues with other people that you play with, because it's not just about impressing the big content creator. It's also about just creating and evoking an environment that wants other people to join the game and play the game that we all love. And that's what these Commander rules don't do. Telling people that you can't play counter spells, telling people that you can't play board wipes, telling people that you can't double sleeve your cards, that one's just for a joke, by the way, doesn't really lead anywhere. And I say that because a lot of times what happens is in the first scenario, people may not have access to certain cards. So when your opponent comes at you with mass land destruction, you may not have the ability to play cards that cheap and efficiently make your permanents indestructible. You may not even be prepared for it, because a lot of times you're going into an LGS's Commander night, you're going in blind, you don't know what your opponent's playing, it's not your regular friend group, and so you're just in this big open wild of like what's playable, what's not. And so in that scenario, I can see why someone would want to enact a rule like this. But I think in many ways what you can do in response to this is maybe have the idea of communication lead to politicking in the game. One of the key aspects to Commander being making deals and evoking different responses based on how you communicate with certain players, and just kind of tuning the game to your narrative, where if someone does go for mass land destruction or you evoke a sense of danger towards that person, then maybe other players in the pod can hold up counter magic, hold up interaction, or play certain spells that do circumvent some of this, or they can play ramp spells that specifically help you, or other things like that to catch you back up into the game. You can politic your way, and you can make the experience that you want in your Commander games yours. And so that's one situation where if you were to say no mass land destruction, you could instead work towards politicking in the blind and work towards just curating your own experience. Another situation might be that in that singular pod, you may only have a certain amount of time to actually play the game itself, which is perfectly fine. Things are really busy. Unfortunately, in Western society, we don't prioritize this self. We prioritize helping big corporate organizations, and working more than 8 hours a day is somehow like an amazing thing. Going out and spending time with your family and enjoying your hobbies isn't really the luxury that a lot of people get. So the couple hours that you do get, the 1, maybe 2, heck, maybe 3 hours a week that you get to play Commander is very limited. You may hop down to the LGS, you get 1 hour. That's maybe like 1.5 type of games before you have to head back home, head back to whatever school, work, anything. So in that time, you play an experience where your opponent plays Grand Arbiter. All your spells cost more, their spells cost less. And then in that situation, you feel like you weren't able to play the game because maybe you're playing a slightly lower powered deck, and then you weren't able to deal with what your opponent's doing. And in that type of situation, I would say, well, maybe you should play more interactive decks. In that case, on top of politicking, a lot of these very kind of oppressive strategies do start with building blocks. They do start with a couple of cards really coming together to stop the whole table. And in this case, it might just be an ensnaring bridge. It might be a torpor orb. In a lot of those cases, why aren't you playing some type of catch-all like an echoing truth to bounce permanents, or just fracturing gust as a board wipe that could also be a wipe for artifacts and enchantments, depending on like the pod you're in? Like, why aren't you playing things like this? Because it's not just about stopping the prison player, but it's also having cards that have a high amount of versatility. Yes, there's a level of flavor to be attached. Maybe you're playing cards with only a certain amount of arts, or maybe you're playing cards that are on theme with something that's going on with your commander, sure, but that doesn't prevent you from finding an answer that actually does work in that case. And with the amount of legendaries and commander product that's out there, you'd have a real hard time convincing me that there isn't something in your colors that provide an option to the problem that you have across from you. And if that doesn't work, then you go back to point number one of politicking and saying, hey, I can help deal with this problem, but someone else needs to help me with this problem. And you can work mutually towards that. So automatically, I've given you two tools to work towards maybe like a time restriction, therefore curating a better game for yourself in a more social environment where you feel like you've interacted with a bunch of people and you've had a good time being outside about and communicating and growing your own personal self. Now, I will also understand the argument of, yes, you only have a certain amount of cards and you may not draw the answers that you have. I will say to that point, though, unfortunately, you just have to be okay with it. A lot of commander players don't understand that 25% of the time is what you have to win the game. In an even playing field with 4 players in the pod, if you play 4 games, 1 out of those 4 games, you have the chance to win. The majority of the time, you will not be able to play a game that you may generally view as one that is of your experience or one that you want. You generally won't be able to win the game a lot more in terms of the amount that you might win in a constructed format. And you have to be okay with that. You have to be okay with the non-games. You have to be okay with not being able to combo off because the opponent played this prison spell. You have to be okay with the negative consequences of the situation. And I can't really get into the wider situation of the limited time because there are so many different outside life factors of whether or not you can maybe go to a closer LGS or have some kind of communication with your friends and your partners to potentially let you play more. Like those are different things. I'm talking about simple solutions in a vacuum that I think for the average player would honestly just help them. At the end of the day, I generally think these simple solutions can come forward to help just make your experience better in the long run as a commander player, to help curate the experience that you're looking for. Because at the end of the day, these rules really then go to show that, heck, if it doesn't come to the experience, if it doesn't come towards the ability for you to politic, if it doesn't come towards the ability for you to then kind of work with other players with the solutions that you already have and play better cards, what is it? Is it the fact that you don't have access to these cards? In that case, why not just proxy? Because in a lot of situations, I think a lot of commander tables would allow you to proxy, especially with open communication. You let them know that, like, hey, you know what? I have a couple of proxies in here. Is that cool? Or my whole deck is proxy because I didn't want to like buy into this deck. I just wanted to see it because I thought it was cool. Is that okay? And I think honestly, like 80-90% of tables would be okay with that. And what I really want to address is the other 10 to 20%. Why are you not okay with proxies? In a commander format, in a casual environment, why are you not okay with proxies? Because don't argue with me about CDH tournaments or constructed play. That's a whole different conversation. Let me know in the comment section down below. Give me a real reason, bit of a leading statement there. Give me a real reason as to why you aren't okay with your other opponents and yourself playing proxies. What do you mean that you want real cards, that you bought cards and other people should buy cards? Is it Magic the Gathering or is it Purchasing the Gathering? Is it purchasing the cards? Are we no longer Magic the Gathering? We are called Purchasing the Cards, the game, the collectible trading card game, the purchasing card game, the PCG. What are we playing right now? Because I thought the whole reason you put these cards together, that you set aside time in your week to go play the game, to go to the LGS, use up your gas, use up your time, spend money on food, sit down, sleeve your decks. I thought the whole reason was to play the game, not police other people's experiences. So what are these rules really about? Are you saying that you don't want accessibility for other players? Because that's kind of what it's leading to. You're sounding kind of elitist in the sense that you don't want other people to play the game because you, for some reason, aren't open to proxying. I genuinely don't understand the whole anti-proxy thing, because you can play different cards now. You do have access to better cards, and now you can play different cards and different options to try them out, to play them, to see how they work in your group. You can play certain cards that are more political, like one of my favorite is Scheming Symmetry, a tutor that isn't like Vampiric Tutor that is very selfish. You play Scheming Symmetry that tutors for yourself and your opponent, and you can choose which player. Right? Like there's different cards that you can use that help your opponents in different ways, create great political situations and great conversation for the group and big plays in that moment. There's different ways, again, as I've said for the 4th or 5th time, that you can curate your experience to have the game that you want. You're just walking away from it and just citing terrible rules, preventing people from playing counterspells, playing board wipes, doing all this because you don't want to have a conversation and you're being elitist about proxies. What is the situation here? And I hope all of these play groups that have this problem can look deep inside of yourself and look to then address the player that may be taking advantage of this. Because I think the final statement that a lot of you might be talking about is the EDH arms race. The one where, yes, if you have open kind of play groups, you have that one player that may look to take advantage of that situation. And they're going to be the ones that play the infinite combos everywhere. They're always going to play land destruction, do this, do that. That's okay though, because why don't you tell them like, okay, in this game, you play that deck and we'll work around it. Heck, even play that group and don't go to like be that person that gangs up on them. Why is that the solution? Why don't you then improve your play? Then you say, okay, you're playing your mass land destruction deck. Let me play this proxy deck that's like a little softer to it. I have some, making your permanents indestructible or Teferi's protection that can protect me from all that. Like, why don't you play those decks? And then they can have an experience with like, oh, wow, yeah, I did get to play my plan. And like, you know what, it's great. But like against this situation where my opponents are able to interact, it's not as great. And so it kind of removes some of that fun from them. It feels like they're not kind of just stomping you. So it takes the ego out of the situation from them, but they also still get to play their game. Why not have that conversation with the person and allow them to experience Magic the way they want to? Why not help curate that experience for them? Because that's what you're doing with your rules. You're forcing your rules onto other people so that they work to your experience. Why not let the mass land destruction player, why not let the combo player, why not let them just play the game that they want to play once or twice as a compromise? Because that's what it is at the end of the day. Life is about compromise. You can't always have your way. And if you think you can, you're just a child. You haven't grown up yet. Be honest with yourself, folks. A lot of you Commander players at the casual level don't know how to communicate. You don't know how to promote the gathering. You're probably just making the game worse at the end of the day. Sure, there are bad eggs in the world, and yes, there are bad Magic players that crap and whine and just will cry when you target them or when they don't get to do their thing. Those are case-by-case bases. Don't take the extreme and put that on every Magic player. Be communicative, open yourself up to different ideas and explore different routes and avenues instead of just being wholeheartedly restrictive. You don't need these silly rules to improve your games of Magic the Gathering. And I hope someone in this video gains something from this and they're able to look introspectively at their group and take maybe a next step to be more inclusive in their group, to allow different groups and strategies, different play styles into their group so that they may improve their play, improve their deck building, and overall just have a better experience in their games of Magic the Gathering. Let me know what you think of the video in the comment section down below. Leave a like on the video and I'll love it if you share it out for anyone that may share these thoughts or may counter these thoughts. I'd love to have some back and forth with you in the comment section down below. But yeah, that's what I think about ridiculous rules in Commander.